I think I probably introduced myself to most of you, but I'm Bob Hurte, and I want to thank Peter, and I want to thank the Babe Ruth chapter of SABR and the museum for inviting me to be here today. And as you can see, I'm here to talk about my newest book. It's called The Baseball Doesn't Fall Far from the Tree. But I also, since I had never did a presentation on a book, or I've only written two, but on a book, I was trying to figure out how I was going to go about talking about the book. And I don't want to tell you everything about it because then you wouldn't have to read it, right, if I told you everything. But I figured I'd also talk about dreams and father and son dreams, which is actually kind of the underlying premise of the book. But anyway, like most of you, I love baseball. Otherwise, I'm sure you wouldn't be here, right? I don't know about if anyone else, and I know this gentleman here and I and Peter, and we talked about our first time we went to a stadium or our love of the game. But I actually remember the exact date and occurrence that I fell in love with baseball. And that would have been October 7th, 1964. Does anybody have an idea what that might have been?
World Series, right?
That's it. Cardinals and the Yankees were playing. And Ray Sadecki beat Whitey Ford 9-2. Well, the reason, and I was 7 years old, and I can remember rushing off the bus because in the back of the bus, all the older kids were talking about the World Series. Now, I had just started playing t-ball, so I had an idea about baseball, and my dad was a Pittsburgh Pirate fan. I didn't know a whole lot I didn't really watch it on TV. You know, unless my dad was watching and I was just doing it because he was. But anyway, the older kids were talking about this thing called the World Series. And I wanted to be cool also. So I rushed home that day to go to the family black and white TV set and watch the World Series because I wanted to be cool. That was the beginning of my love affair with baseball. Then years later, the following happened, and it might have, you know, I don't know when everyone here that's a SABR fan or SABR member might have joined, but I can remember Ted Williams saying, "SABR is the best kept secret in baseball." Anybody here heard that quote?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought to myself, well, what the heck? If Ted Williams said that, well, then I wanted to find out why. And I've been spending the rest of my life learning why Ted Williams thought that. I became a proud member of SABR in 1998. It opened many doors for me and allowed me to meet several of my former players, and it magically brought my baseball cards to life, such as my dear departed friend, Tom Walker, and here's one of his cards. He signed, it's funny, I got his autograph from a friend of mine in Pittsburgh before I ever even met Tom. And you can see like there's the facsimile of the autograph, but he also signed it. But before I even met Tom, we had kind of a relationship. If it wasn't for Tom Walker, I would have never written this book. It was all due to a conversation that we had. His son Neil, everyone know Neil Walker, that played for the Pirates and Mets, the Yankees, whatever, right? That they both were drafted in the first round of the amateur baseball draft. And at the time, there was only 5. Now there are 5 combinations of fathers and sons. Now there's 10. Once again, I was like, how the heck was that possible? this got me to thinking about a player's journey. And my book, to tell you a little bit about my book, covers the history of the youth leagues, and I talk about scouts, the amateur players draft, and about agents, because once you're drafted, you're going to need an agent. I mean, there was a time when you didn't, but you definitely do nowadays. But before I start telling you about my new book, I'd like to give you some of my baseball background, which I'm sure, like Peter and I forgot your name. Jeff knows. When I first became a member of SABR, I was satisfied with simply receiving and reading the organization publications such as, remember the National Pastime? I used to love this. And of course, the Baseball Journal. And now, of course, it's all available online. I still enjoy getting the book right in the mail.
Me too.
Looking at, yeah. And I can understand why they don't do it. You know, the money, the money that it must cost to send it out. But anyway, at one point, that was good enough for me to get the publications and also to be able to have access online for things in the newsletter. And, you know, for the first couple years, I was satisfied with just that. But then I thought, I want to get more involved. Now, how am I going to do that? I mean, I was horrible in math. I mean, I would never, and still haven't, figured out what sabermetrics is. I don't know, Peter, you know, can you explain sabermetrics? Or
I'm a historian, not a number.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. I was easier with stuff like that. But anyway.
It's any statistic you can't understand.
Yeah. I mean, I love statistics, earned run average, RBIs, you know, things like that, stolen base, you know. But the sabermetrics, I never bothered to learn about it. But that's when I met a man, which you guys would know, named Mark Armour. Is that how you pronounce it?
Armour, yeah.
Armour. And he came to the rescue by starting the bio project. And this gave me a chance to research and write about the game that I love. And since then, I've written over 20 bios electronically on the website. I think it might be 22. I don't write them as often anymore unless, you know, they ask me to do. And some of the bios are in print in SABR books. Now, the bio project had a lofty goal of writing a bio for each retired ball player, and the group has written over 7,000 bios so far. My first bio I wrote, and some of you might know this guy, was on Frank Thomas. Not Frank Thomas of the White Sox, the original Frank Thomas, which I'll let you know. Oh, I became friends with Frank. Also, I'll let you know that he's very proud and stresses that it's the original Frank Thomas. In fact, if you...
He was at our Pittsburgh.
Oh, yeah, and you know what? I went to Korea that time. I remember, who was it? Somebody asked, oh, are you going to the Pittsburgh convention? I'm like, not good timing, you know, because I'm going... My children I adopted from Korea. So it was my first trip to Korea, and I'm thinking all the money I spent to go to Korea about driving across Pennsylvania to the Pittsburgh convention, and it was Korea, you know, like that. But anyway, yeah, Frank's a great guy. Very proud, if you went there. He's very proud of his baseball experience. I wrote my first bio on Frank. Frank was my coach at the Pirates Dream Week, along with Kent Colvey, who I also became and still am. I could show you my cell phone. I have his number. He's good friends with. And I wrote his bio. But anyway, Frank started, it's when I went to the camp, you know, people say, oh, I saw this older guy, and I'm like, I said, who's that? And I'm a huge Pirates fan. Why don't I know this guy, right? They go, who's that? Oh, that's Frank Thomas. He played for the Pirates in the 50s, and he played for the Mets, and that's where the original, well, I mean, he was an original Met. But so anyway, we became friends, and we became pen pals. And the way we did that, there was an article that was in the Star Ledger written by Moss Klein. I don't know if you guys heard of him. He was a baseball, okay. Moss Klein. And Moss Klein wrote a column, and he talked about how the Frank Thomas we know in the Hall of Fame and at the time, has a way to go before he meets what Frank Thomas, the original Thomas, achieved. So I cut it out, and I sent Frank a letter. This is the first letter I ever sent to Frank. Well, he just loved it. And Frank and I had a regular letter write. I mean, I would write a letter, I'd think of something, I'd write a letter to Frank. 3-4 days later, in the mailbox, Frank was responding, because Frank always returned his fan mail. But anyway, we exchanged over 100 letters until the day he died, or the year he died, in 2023. Anyway, I know I'm regressing, and I have a habit of doing that. Because of my bio project experience, it gave me the confidence to write 2 books, which are Intelligent Influence in Baseball and the current one. And to think that I have Bill Mazeroski to thank for me writing my second book. Now you're probably wondering, what the heck? How could Bill Mazeroski be the influence to me writing my second book? Well, there's the reason. Sweet 60, which was a SABR book about the 1960 World Series. And it was sort of like a domino effect. I am eventually going to get talking about my book. I know I'm talking a lot about myself, but that's just me, right? So anyway, the book is not about his walk-off homer, which, you can tell by looking at the cover. It was because when I write my bios, it is my practice to develop a personal relationship with the person I'm writing about. And I interview them, and I also talk to their opponents and their teammates. Well, one of the players that I spoke with was a guy named Dave Justy. Everyone know Dave Justy? Okay, Dave Justy was a great reliever, mostly with the Pirates. He was with Houston. Actually, it was when I think Houston was an expansion team. He pitched for Syracuse University. But so Dave Justy played with and against Bill Mazeroski. He told me how great a second baseman he was, but that I should talk, and now I'm getting close to, I swear, I'm getting close to talking about my book. He said, you know what? You should talk to Tom Walker. And at the time, I didn't know who no, actually I did because of that card, but I wasn't thinking of it. He goes, you need to talk to Tom Walker, because Tom Walker is down in spring training, Pirates spring training, tutoring Neil Walker on the nuances of playing second base. And I'm sure he could tell you a lot about Mazeroski and his son. Well, I was writing that because I was writing the Mazeroski bio. I don't know if you know this, but when Neil was drafted, he was drafted as a catcher out of high school, and then in the minors he was a third baseman. Then there was an injury with the second baseman that they had, and he, lo and behold, became a second baseman. And who's better to teach how to play second base than Bill Mazeroski? I know you might say Davey Johnson or Roberto Alomar, but
No, I agree on that.
yeah, I mean, to learn how to play, that. So anyway, I'm talking to Tom about that, and I decide, hey, why don't I write a bio on Tom Walker? Seems like an interesting guy. And some of the interesting things I learned was not only his son Neil was drafted in the first round, but he pitched, and we had talked about it. He had pitched a 15-inning no-hitter when he was playing in the minor leagues. He played for the Dallas-Fort Worth Orioles against the Albuquerque Dodgers. And that was one interesting story. Another interesting story, and I don't know because a lot of you aren't from like the New York area or Pittsburgh area, but Tom Walker was one of the last people to see Roberto Clemente alive. Did any of you know that? Well, anyway, the way that happened was Tom Walker, when he played for the Montreal Expos, he went to Puerto Rico to play for Clemente in the Winter Leagues. And I don't know if you remember, there was a terrible earthquake in Nicaragua. And Tom and Baylor Moore and Manny Sanguillen, and there might have been others, but those three that I remember, helped load the plane up with supplies to go to Nicaragua. And Tom had offered to go with Roberto to Nicaragua and hand out supplies. He said, "Oh, no," he says, "Puerto Rico really celebrates New Year's Eve. You're a young guy, you should stick around." So Tom did. And that night, a mile off the island of Puerto Rico, the plane crashed in the Atlantic Ocean. But like I said, we're getting to where I'm going to talk about the book, is that Tom and his son were both drafted in the first round. They're one of the 5 father and son combinations. But my book is not just about Tom and his son. You know, it's about all the people that were drafted in the baseball amateur draft, and that was 10 of them. Okay. Man, I should have changed the timer or something for. Okay. Now we move on to like the dreams of father and son catches. Now, anyone here as a father had a son that you played catch with, or okay? And I experienced and seeing. I can tell you, as a father, I had 2 sons. Oh, okay. Seeing your son catch a baseball for the first time, it was like the 4th of July. And that's also a time a lot of fathers have the dream. And the dream is, oh, my son is going to go to the major leagues, right? When I was involved in my recreation commission, that was, you know, every parent seemed to think their son was going to be playing in the major leagues. But anyway, they started to have this dream. But eventually the smoke clears and you come down, realizing that only a few fortunate can travel that dream. And if you've been following baseball, you understand that making the major leagues is quite a journey. But when a father and son both make it to that level, it becomes even smaller. So here I am with this remarkable historical fact to write about, and I have no way to, how I'm going to start this. So then I thought, there's a man named John Thorne. We all know John Thorne, right? John Thorne is the official historian of Major League Baseball. And I'm going to read something, a quote from John. "Baseball, better than anything else in our culture, it enables fathers and sons to speak on a level playing field while building up from within the personal history of a shared experience." Those words made it easier for me to write the book. In fact, I start my book with those words. I decided to start with father and sons playing catch and the dream of making it to the majors. There have only been 18,000 people drafted in the amateur draft since it began back in 1965. The game is essentially like a playground merry-go-round. Not everyone can stay on it forever. Eventually, everyone needs to get off. It's just a matter of time. So my book is not about a single thing, but 3. It is about father and son relationships, dreams, and realities. It all starts with youth baseball. How many of you played youth baseball? Okay. Did any of you ever entertain the idea of going into the major leagues, becoming a major leaguer? Or you had a good grip on your playing ability?
I was very bad at sports.
But you play now though, right? You said you play. Oh, I thought you did. Okay.
I just watch it.
Oh.
I just go to games.
Hey, that's a good thing. Think about youth baseball as climbing up a ladder. The higher you climb, the tougher the rungs get. And along with each step, it has a way of eliminating participants, such as T-ball. Did anybody play T-ball or no? Okay, right? Okay, I coached it, I played it. I probably started playing it around the time that it actually was invented. But T-ball is fun, and it gives kids a chance to run around and be with their peers. There's no stress. There is no winning or losing. Each little kid's smile is their game face. While these young kids love those times, not everyone shared the same affection. I can remember when I was coaching, hearing parents comparing T-ball to watching paint dry. After T-ball, unfortunately, the playing population gets smaller, especially when it becomes like real baseball. This is when things start to happen, such as when a player gets hit by a ball, when you get like Little League level, and then the field dimensions get bigger, the throws are longer, first base is further away. It becomes a baseball like the game seen on TV. It is also very shocking when a player learns that he's not the best on the field. And this might happen at the Babe Ruth level, Pony League, American Legion, travel ball, maybe high school or college. I once coached a kid named Jimmy, which I changed the name. It was actually something else, but in case he sees this video, I didn't want to say, I didn't sign a release form. It's like, but he was the best I ever saw play Little League. He would go on to excel in the American Legion. In fact, he became All-State in the state of New Jersey. He was so good that he earned a scholarship to the University of Florida. After 2 years of sitting on the bench, he decided to quit. He realized that there were better players than him. And he decided it was time for him to concentrate on going to school. Now, I explore in the book, and now we're moving along. I'm at the second chapter. I know, Bob, you're just crazy here. But I talk about the youth leagues and some of the notable players from each league, like Al Downing. Anybody ever heard of Al Downing? Who's a nice guy. I've talked to Al. And he's from Trenton, New Jersey, who was lights out for Trenton in the Trenton Babe Ruth League. Or Don Drysdale. Don Drysdale played American Legion ball, and he was a second baseman. And apparently, one of the team's pitchers, either he couldn't pitch the championship game or got sick or whatever, but Don Drysdale became a pitcher, and as you know, he's in the Hall of Fame. And then there's Yogi Berra, and then my friend Neil Walker. They all played American Legion ball. I'm going to give you another quote. We're all told at some point in time that we can no longer play the children's game. We just don't know when it's going to be. Some of us are told at 18, some of us are told at 40, but we're all told. Does that sound familiar to anyone? Okay, I'm going to take that as a no. It's from the movie Moneyball, and it was said by one of the scouts in the room that day. Okay, now I'm moving on to the third chapter. And there's not a lot of chapters in the book, so I'm not going to cover it, so I apologize again. But anyway, I discussed what is probably my favorite group of people in the baseball arena, the Scouts. And I think that they might be the most undervalued entity of the game. Of course, not everyone shares my opinion. Someone comes to mind, Marge Schott. Does anybody know who Marge Schott is? Marge Schott, the former owner of the Cincinnati Reds, she famously said this about Scouts. All they do is sit around and watch ball games. She didn't have a lot of respect for Scouts.
She's probably a good person not to share any opinion.
And how in many ways it remained the same. First and foremost, the baseball scout is a talent evaluator. He determines a player's skills and abilities. He must also be aware of the needs of the organization he works for and filling their needs. Teams began employing scouts in the early 1900s. That seems amazing. 1900s, I think of the scouts like Scott Burris in the 1970s, right? I introduced the reader to many of the early scouts. They were people like Ted Sullivan, Larry Sutton, and Dick Kinsella. And I shed a little light on each of them, so I kind of like profile. That's my game, right? I especially enjoyed writing about Dick Kinsella. Dick was a pioneer. He developed his own type of scouting system. He had a newspaper subscription in every town that had a professional team. He studied the league statistics and shrewdly utilized the waiver wire. So Dick essentially did everything that one click of a computer button nowadays can do. When I began interviewing some of the former talent evaluators, I brought up the names of two popular yet contrasting movies. As we mentioned before, Moneyball. Another movie which might be a favorite of yours was a favorite of mine, Trouble with the Curve. Is anybody? Great movie. I love it. Clint Eastwood. Mm-hmm. Okay. I asked each scout that I spoke what their opinions were of the movies and how they would prefer scouting to be done. The politically correct response is to say a marriage between both. I enjoyed hearing and writing about the duds and gems the scouts talked about. There was a scout in the game called Gary Hughes, who I recalled hearing about, a kid who scouts said didn't have the tools or talent, but possessed an enormous amount of hustle. Scouts felt that he could hustle his way to AA ball. Now think about this. Who do you think that kid was? Oh, I skipped a couple. That is Pete Rose. And I'm not going to, since I'm having a hard time with pictures, I won't go into all that. Anyway, sometimes a scout goes to see a specific player, but discovers one that's not on the radar. For instance, Ed Montague of the New York Giants, he went to scout a player from the Birmingham Black Barons of the Negro Leagues, and he was stunned when he saw this young kid named Willie Mays. Instead of signing the player he went to see, he signed to say, "Hey kid," on the spot. Instead, the rest is history, all the way to Cooperstown. For every David Clyde or Sean Abner, there is a Mike Piazza or a John Smoltz. In the book, I included a story about the day that Satchel Paige tried out for the 1948 Cleveland Indians. It was quite comical. Satch, well, for one thing, being an old man, walking into Cleveland as for a tryout, kind of blew the mind of Hank Greenberg and Lou Boudreau. Anyway, Satch walked in, Lou Boudreau batted against him and failed to get a decent hit. Then close to 20 years later, I was attending the Jerry Malloy Negro League Conference and met a man named Larry LaGrange, who told me about catching Satchel Paige when they were barnstorming. He said that Satch could sit on a 5-gallon bucket, stick his glove out, and Satch would hit it every time, confirming the legend's uncanny control. Scouting is filled with hits or misses, like the Yankees missing out on Juan Gonzalez or the Expos getting Vlad Guerrero Sr. Sports Illustrated, in fact, called Guerrero's signing the second best steal since the Yankees got Babe Ruth. Then as a Pirate fan, now listen, I will not divulge the person who told me this, but it killed me when I did hear it. Then as a Pirate fan, I learned that Pittsburgh missed out on signing Albert Pujols. But I was sworn to secrecy by the scout, which is nameless, he's still alive and still scouting. Apparently the Pirates passed on Albert for several rounds. Although the scout I spoke to was very high on him. It seems the management always felt there was always someone they wanted more than instead of Albert. But when they were ready, Albert signed with somebody else. Signing Albert Pujols for the Pirates, and if you remember the time that would have made a world of difference to a long-suffering Pirate fan like myself. Instead of having the Pirates killer, he would someday, and he will, go into the Hall of Fame. I also discuss Branch Rickey and his innovations and accomplishments. I think, and this is my opinion, but I'm sure some of you probably would agree, but he's one of the top 5 people in the history of Major League Baseball with his innovations and his track record. Or Ewing Kauffman, who, for thinking out of the box with his Royals Baseball Academy. All in all, the chapter echoes the old school mantra, which other scouts told me: find a ballpark and get in it. You know, they said you can't judge a ball player by looking at a computer screen. When I reached chapter 4, the stage was set for the baseball draft, Rule 4 baseball amateur draft. To quote Dan Duquette, which I'm sure you guys know Dan Duquette, right? Nice guy also. Talked to him on the phone. He said, I love the players' draft. I look at it as Christmas Day. The draft began in 1965 and continues today. Over 50,000 players have been drafted over the past 6 decades. Surprisingly, there have only been 13 first-round draft picks enshrined in baseball's Hall of Fame. Before the amateur draft, the wealthier teams signed something called bonus babies. I'm sure we all know that. The Merriam-Webster defines the term bonus baby as a baseball player who was given a large amount of money in his professional contract. I could not have a discussion without talking about them in the draft. Baseball historians identified Dick Wakefield as the first bonus baby. He was signed by the Detroit Tigers in 1941 out of the University of Michigan for $52,000 and a brand new car. Rick Reichert was the last official bonus baby. It was the bidding war over his services that led for the need of the 1965 Players Draft. Rick went on to enjoy an 11-year career, but not a single day in minor league baseball. The bonus rule was instituted in 1947, and this was a practice or solution that they hoped would prevent teams from assigning players to their farm teams. This was the intention to create a level playing field between the haves and the have-nots. Under the rule, when a team signed a player over a specific amount, which was $4,000, which in those days was considered a lot of money, the player would be required to be kept on the Major League Club's roster for at least 2 years. Many just wasted away on the bench. This rule was a great big failure. The players involved were essentially held prisoner for the first 2 years of their assignment. which did not allow much development. One glaring example was Tom Qualters. He was signed by the Philadelphia Phillies, Peter's favorite team. He also wasn't very popular with his Philly teammates, at least not most of them. They felt he took a spot from someone who could have played. Tom appeared in one game the first 2 years of his career, and he didn't get a fair opportunity during this time in Philadelphia. In fact, he finished his third and final season with the White Sox and the Phillies. There were 57 players selected in the bonus rule era. Most of them spent their required 2 years anchored to the bench. For every Harmon Killebrew, Al Kaline, and Sandy Koufax, there was a Mark Berth, a Bobby Heinrich, or a Frank Zepko. The first three names have their names inscribed in plaques in Cooperstown. While it became painstakingly obvious that bonus rules was a bad idea, it was rescinded in 1958. But then it was reestablished with more relaxed stipulations after the Major League Baseball expanded in 61 and 62. The Pittsburgh Pirates drafted a bonus baby who I really remember and had high hopes for, named Bob Bailey. We all know Bob Bailey. Bob Bailey was signed out of high school from Southern California, and he never played a single day in the minor leagues. The Rule 4 amateur players draft's intention was to create a competitive balance. Commissioner Ford Freck fostered this idea. In my opinion, the draft is the best way in accomplishing that. I can't think of anything else. I don't make enough money to do that, and they're not knocking on my door. Originally, each team in the draft was entitled to one selection per round. Later, the number of selections would be changed when draft picks were able to be used in trades. Of the 10,000s of players drafted since the inaugural draft of number 1 picks overall, only Harold Baines, Ken Griffey Jr., Chipper Jones, and Joe Mauer found themselves in the Hall of Fame. Since then, there have only been a little over 20 who have bypassed the minor leagues. Dave Winfield was drafted by 3 major sports teams, the San Diego Padres, the Atlanta Hawks, and the Minnesota Vikings. But he chose baseball, which must have been the correct choice since he is now in the Hall of Fame. Dan Duquette felt when evaluating a prospect, you went beyond a player's physical capabilities. Instead to also look at mental skills, ambition, drive, and passion. He felt that his best 2 signings were Vladimir Guerrero and Nomar Garcia Parra. Nomar was recommended to Duquette by a fellow scout. It told him how the ball just jumped off the bat, which warrants the need of a scout to get out and see a prospect, not simply sitting in front of a computer screen. And last part of the first part of this, or the last chapter of the first part of the book is chapter 5, and I talk about agents. And as you know, I'm trying to talk quicker here. The appearance of a player's agent can be traced back to the days of Christy Walsh and Babe Ruth. Walsh thought out of the box. His one innovation was barnstorming. Christy was never lost for promotional ideas for the Sultan SWAT. Christy brought a change to sports marketing. He turned sports athletes simply from ball players into sports idols. And when Christy died, the void was filled by Frank Scott. Frank also came up with ways to supplement a player's income. Before Scott, players supplemented their income by working a job during the off season, like waiting on tables or selling fishing tackle, insurance, or working in a liquor store. Scott was responsible for getting Yogi Berra his Yoo-Hoo deal, or Mickey Mantle his deal with Bazooka Bubblegum. When Don Larson threw his no-hitter in the World Series, Frank got him an extra 22 grand, which was a lot because he got close to minimum wage. And when Roger Maris, broke Babe Ruth's record, he got him additional 200,000. Marty Appel felt that while the general public didn't know a lot about Frank Thomas, the players certainly did. And the influence was money. Also in my discussions of agents, I do biographical sketches on some of the better known agents in the 1970s. They became popular when the market exploded. They no longer did the agents stand in the shadows of Christy Walsh or Frank Scott. No, they became visible as much as the athletes that they represented. They were agents, and you probably know these names. They were agents like Lee Steinberg, Ron Shapiro, Dick Moss, Jerry Kapstein, Tom Reich, and of course, our favorite Scott Burrows. The agent gained a reputation, whether it was popular or unpopular, depending on your perspective. Hollywood got into the act and made a movie about baseball. What movie do you think about agents in baseball? And the movie is Jerry Maguire,
Oh,
which is said to be,
I've never seen it.
you what?
I've seen clips of it, but I've never watched the whole thing.
It isn't bad. I just did watch that the other day. My wife doesn't like Tom Cruise, so it's not on a lot in the house, but one night I did watch it. It's apparently based on Lee Steinberg's life. The baseball agents mentioned in this chapter are as interesting as the players profiled in this book. I'm sure you guys know Ron Shapiro. He represented like everybody in Baltimore, right? Okay, we're at the second part of my book. And I'm only gonna do this one briefly. The second part of my book is the real reason I wrote it. On those pages, I hope to formally introduce the reader to each of the 20 men, the 10 father and sons who were drafted in the first round. I am honored to introduce the following 10 combos: the Greaves, the Burrows, Swishers, Mayberries, Walkers, Boxbergers, DeShields, Nevins, Witts, and Soderstrongs. We all know those names, I'm sure, right? Their careers traveled down different paths and directions. Most of them stayed affiliated in the game they loved. So some as coaches and managers, special assistants, others as player agents and announcers. And I promise there are some interesting stories sprinkled among the 20 profiles that I wrote about. I'm going to actually skip a little here. The first one I want to talk to is the first person that's mentioned in the book, and that is Tom Grieve. He became identified as Mr. Ranger, or Delino DeShields Jr., who enters each season hoping to hang on to a roster position. Tom is a humble person who loves the game of baseball. I don't know if Delino is humble, but I do know he's one of the players we can root for. Instead of rehashing the players' careers and post-playing careers, I decided to touch on a few of them who have interesting active and post careers. Like I talked about Tom he played 9 years in the major leagues. He became a baseball executive where he eventually became a general manager, and he actually was a general manager longer than a player. When a certain president, George Bush, decided to get rid of Tom, they offered him a job as a broadcaster. At first he was like, I don't know anything how to do that. He served 28 years as the color analyst of the Texas Rangers. He's also in remission with cancer. He's been fighting cancer, and he's another great guy. I spoke to him on the phone. His mark on the game is his loyalty and his longevity. Okay. Tom's son Ben We know Ben Grieve, remember Ben Grieve? Who I had a lot of high hopes for. In fact, there was talk that he would be a Pirates Indian, and it never happened, and kind of thank God he wasn't because his career was down. He became a Rookie of the Year with the Oakland A's, and he never had the same amount of passion as his dad for the game. Then I move on to the second person, Jeff Burroughs, and there wasn't any question of Jeff's ability to hit a ball. In fact, Ted Williams ordained him as the best young hitter that he ever saw. During his career, he hit over 30 home runs, drove in 100 runs twice. He was also an All-Star twice, and during his career, he even won the American League MVP in 1974. He left baseball in 1985, but would resurface to coach his son in back-to-back Little League World Series champions. Jeff's career was overshadowed by his son Sean, who led a life that every kid could dream about. Since Sean was from Southern California, he appeared as an extra in several movies and television shows. In fact, he even auditioned for a part as a young Babe Ruth. Does anyone ever see the John Goodman's Babe Ruth Museum?
It's pretty bad.
You liked it?
That was a
No,
museum.
it's pretty bad.
That's what I was going to say. I thought you said good. I wasn't going to go in with my comment there. What was said is while he possessed the baseball skills of a young Babe Ruth, he didn't get the part. And the reason he didn't get it, does anyone have an idea what the reason might be? Okay, the reason that Sean did not get the part of a young Babe Ruth is he didn't look enough like John Goodman, which might not have been a bad thing, right? He also was a Little League World Series hero, and he was interviewed by David Letterman. Like his father before him, he was drafted in the first round of the amateur draft. He was a member of the 2000 USA gold medal team. And that was pretty much it. He went to the San Diego Padres to start. And I say to you that who wouldn't want his life? He was at the top of the world. That was until 2006, at the age of 26. Sean became what a lot of people would refer to as a tortured soul. Sean found himself out of baseball and in Las Vegas dumpsters scrounging for half-eaten cheeseburgers and washing them down with Slurpees. His weight ballooned up to 300 pounds, and he was getting high on anything he could get his hands on. Sean had hit rock bottom. But then one day, he had an epiphany. So he called his agent, and after plenty of hard work and determination, he made it back to the major leagues in 2011. So he was out of Major League Ball almost 3 years, and he made it back, which is quite an accomplishment and inspiration. He first played for the Arizona Diamondbacks and then the Minnesota Twins. But then he went on to be a free agent, but there were no takers and he never made it back. He went on to play in independent baseball, and I actually worked as in the press box of the Somerset Patriots when they were an independent team, and I actually saw Sean Burroughs play. Didn't do anything crazy, although he had good statistics. But after he played his way out of baseball, played it out of his love of the game, he went back to Long Beach, California, and he coached his son Knox in the Little League, the Little League team that his father and he played on. Hollywood would love this story. It went full circle. That was until May 11th, 2024. Anyone have an idea what happened in that? Okay. The body of Sean Burroughs was found unconscious next to his car. At 43 years old, he died of fentanyl intoxication. It was ruled accidental. It is easy to say that Sean was too young to die. The fact is, he was. But his life taught us a valuable lesson. As bad as things can happen or can get, never give up. Of course, I got to talk a little bit about the Walkers. We all know about the logjam that Tom was in with the Orioles. His son actually he's a hometown Pittsburgh boy, and he got the moniker of the Pittsburgh Kid. He enjoyed a 10-year career, and he's returned to announcing with the Pirates, which I listen to the Pirates online almost every night. And Neil does quite a job. Then another player profile in the book was Bobby Witt Sr. Do we remember Bobby Witt Sr., the pitcher? Okay, Bobby Witt Sr. received an unprecedented perfect rating of 80 by the National Baseball Scouting Bureau. I informed him of that, and he just chuckled about it. He said that he remembered that the planets must have aligned that day. It was a night game. He threw 9 innings, struck out 17, and by his estimation, because I don't know, I guess they had radar guns, but he estimated that he was throwing 95 miles an hour on each pitch. He described if you were going to get drafted, you'd want someone like Jim Walton, who was the scout, in the stands. Walton worked for the Scouting Bureau and actually filed the report. Bobby Sr. is now an agent, and of course his biggest client is his son. Bobby Witt Jr. is always wanted to be a major league player, and every night his father would hit him ground balls for 30 to 35 minutes. Think about that. Fielding ground balls for that amount of time is, you have to love the game or love playing. He's played before he made it to the majors, he played in several major league parks for several youth showcases, like Nationals Park in DC, Petco Park in San Diego, Wrigley Field, and then in 2021 at Coors Field for the Futures game. Bobby won America's Minor League Player of the Year that award that year. And then he went on to come in 4th as Rookie of the Year in 2022. He had even better statistics the next season, which leads me to predict, I think he's injured, but my prediction is that Bobby Witt Jr. is going to be in the Hall of Fame someday. Kid, I think. But then again, what do I know? The book also includes America's amateur baseball first round. The indexes, if you look at the back of the book, there's indexes of the year that the draft took and where your team and the different players' profile were listed. All in all, the book shows that in baseball, scouts are pretty smart, but they don't always possess a crystal ball. And I'm sorry for it being that long, but I hope you found some of it interesting. And that's my presentation.
Thank you, Bob.
Okay, thank you.
Is it only father sons that made it both first draft?
Yeah, that's
okay.
yeah. I think off the top of my head, there's over 2,000 father and sons
okay.
that both played baseball.
I was thinking Alomar, but I'm like, oh, you didn't say Alomar.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say that because, like when I was talking to Dan Duquette or talking to some other people that I interviewed, and they're like, oh, the Griffeys, they must be one of them. I'm like, well, Ken Griffey was number 1 overall, but his father was like 362 or something.
Oh, yeah, there were a lot of fathers.
Bonds, of course, Bonds. Of course I had to say that because he was a Pirate.
Some of those guys came in before the draft, too.
Right, exactly.
Do you know the name Dutch Dorman?
Why does that sound for what team?
Phillies, mostly.
Yeah.
He was from York.
Yeah. I think.
I had a friend of mine that was a friend of his, so that's right.
See, he's dead. He passed away.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
My brother, I know his name, but my brother was worked in the post office for in the town of Raritan, New Jersey. I don't know if you ever heard. It's a small little Italian borough, right? And one time I guess there was some lost mail, and he located it for this guy, and he was an ex-Philly, and the guy actually, when he told the guy to come in and he gave him his mail, he said, "Oh, my son, my brother is a big baseball fan." And I have an autographed picture. Of course, I don't remember his name, but I have a picture somewhere of him. But yeah, it's I think there's like 2,300 father and sons to play. Oh yeah, Connie Mack. Think about it, and his son only played one at bat. So it was interesting, and I was, and it's funny. I wrote that book because my wife told me. I guess I do a lot of things because my wife told me. But anyone that's been married probably can agree to that, attest to that. But I was writing the first book, and as you know, I co-authored it, although I actually wrote the book. The other person, and he'll admit it, he wrote maybe 1/10 of the book. But I had we were going back and forth over the internet, right? He says, "Oh, why don't you do a chapter on this?" So I write up the chapter, I sent it to him. And it was like he was kind of dragging us, but he's now the lieutenant governor of New Jersey. He used to be the president of Centenary University College. But anyway, he's a very busy guy. Dale Caldwell, known him for a long time, nice guy. So anyway, it was like, I was getting frustrated. My wife says, you know a lot about baseball, you like to write, why don't you just write your own book? So I started writing this. I remember what Tom had told me about, and I said, well, that might be a good thing to write about. And then Dale started responding, and the book got published, and we were off and running. And then a couple years after that, 4 years, I believe, then I wrote that. And I'm actually working on a third book. I'm really, and when I retire, it's what I'm gonna do. So.
What's your third book?
Third book is gonna be called Backyard Catch: Conversations with. Now I'm trying to think of some baseball conversations and reflections. And like I had told Jeff here, and I think I told Peter, that I've interviewed like probably 100 different people involved with the game of baseball, and I'm going to include some of the interview, not the actual interview like author and player and like that, but like Glory. Well, it's not going to be Glory of their times, of course, but any of those type of books, it's like a condensed thing in the interview. But I've talked to a lot of interesting people. I talked to Billy Martin's son. Mm-hmm. I've talked to Nancy Finley, who was Charlie Finley's niece. Mm-hmm. I talked to a lot of players, like a lot of Pirates. I'm going to try to stay away from, because everybody says, "Oh, you could definitely tell that you like the Pirates." Well, yeah. It's like, yeah, I'm guilty. But yeah, it should be fun. And like I said, I'm retiring in November, so, Any other questions or?
Are you selling copies or?
Oh, yeah, I was gonna ask for like $20 for the copy, and I don't do at this time, I don't do Venmo or what are some of the other, PayPal, and what is the other one? There's another one, I can't.
Zillow.
Zillow, that's right. All the kids are